Grief is exhausting. On top of that, it impacts your sleep, your energy levels, and your appetite. What is happening in our bodies when we are carrying around this heavy weight of grief? But more importantly, how do we process that? How do we lift that heaviness? How do we not feel exhausted? I'm going to focus today on sleep, fatigue, and appetite as some of those main symptoms of the exhausting impact of grief. I'm Dr. B. I'm a mental health nurse practitioner, which means I went to school for several years to learn mental health, psychiatric care, medication management, psychology, and psychiatry. But more importantly, I have an intimate knowledge of grief. I have lost 3 children and my husband all over the course of 20 years. And so I have learned about grief, about trauma in a very intimate way. If you would like to start your traumatic grief journey with me in my programs, you can click the link below to start your journey. But today we're going to talk about that weight. Do you feel like it's a weight on your shoulder or a backpack or a weight on your chest and you're just exhausted? We're going to go over this, sleep, energy, and appetite separately. But I want to start by saying grief is not what you were taught. Grief is not some little stages that you go through and in a year you should be moved on from that grief. That is not true of most grief. And it does take a physical toll on the body, especially if we haven't learned how to process the grief and how to separate it from the trauma and all of the other negative impacts that grief can be cumulative onto you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is sleep. Sleep is your priority. Regardless of what you're going through, regardless of whether grief is your biggest struggle or just part of your struggles, sleep is number one. Sleep is the time that our body heals, it rests, it rejuvenates. We live in a culture of productivity being rewarded on a regular basis. But if you are not getting good sleep, good quality sleep, you are not regenerating in order to be starting fresh each day. And so then there's a negative cumulative effect on a lack of sleep. So in all of this, when you're trying to take care of your body in grief or in any kind of pain, you must make sleep a priority. So sleep is your number one priority, but the priority in sleep is for you to take the time to figure it out, right? So sleep hygiene is where we always start with the basics, right? Are you using your phone in the bed? Are you watching TV before bed? Are you using your bed for other things? This is called sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is your sleep is sacred to you, right? You're making your sleep a priority. You're giving yourself enough time, right? That's the priority in sleep. You're giving yourself enough time. You should be around sleep for about 9 hours. You should carve out 9 hours of your day to make sure that you are getting adequate sleep. So in that 9 hours, you are not bringing anything to bed. Maybe a book, but not an electronic book. Maybe your devotions before or meditation tools that you might use before sleep. That bed is for sleep and for intimate relationship. That's it. You don't bring work into bed. You don't bring your laptop into bed. You do not do anything. That is your sacred space. That is part of sleep hygiene. The other part of that sleep hygiene is not using devices prior to sleep. at least 20 minutes. And I could have to be completely honest with you. All I can do is 20 minutes, but they say like 2 hours would be ideal and there's also like glasses that you could wear to decrease the impact of that blue light that's coming in that is stopping melatonin from being produced. You've heard of the hormone melatonin? You can actually buy melatonin supplements over the counter because this is actually a natural hormone that is released when the sun goes down, right? So in the winter, you actually need more sleep than in the summer. And so naturally, if we had no electronics, your body would begin to start producing melatonin when the sun went down. And this melatonin helps you to get to sleep and stay asleep. So a dark room. And you can research more about sleep hygiene. But I know this is hard when the pain of grief is just weighing on you and you're like, I can't sleep. I need you to dedicate time to making sure that you can make sleep a priority. What about sleep meds? I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner. People come to me often saying that they are not sleeping and they want sleep meds. Not all sleep meds are created equal, so I would talk to your doctor about which ones are addicting. And you could even Google what your doctor has prescribed, and there's like an addictive profile for medications. The number, schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. The lower the number, the more addictive qualities that medication has. But there's actually kind of sedating meds that we can use that are not addicting in nature. But in general, if you can, at some point, you want to try to be able to sleep in a natural state. And if you're in the midst of grief, I understand it is more important to use the meds than not sleep. Okay. But using medication to sleep doesn't give you the highest quality of sleep. Okay. So just think about that. This is a long game, but making sleep a priority and really cherishing that time. It is for your mental health, for your physical health, for your longevity, and for your joy and happiness. If you are not getting good quality sleep, it is hard to find joy, to find happiness, to get out of depression, to manage anxiety. Sleep is your priority. What about fatigue? Fatigue is something else that often happens from that weight of grief. Well, again, if you make sleep a priority, some of the fatigue should decrease, right? If you're getting good quality sleep, you're recharging your battery. Now, I can tell you on a personal level, I told you I've lost 3 children. My son Reggie was 5, 6 years ago. My daughter Maya was 3 years ago. My husband was just last year. I am still struggling with fatigue. But I have prioritized sleep, and I wake up most mornings, unless I have like a nightmare or some interruption in sleep. I wake up most mornings with some energy. It's just, by 3 o'clock, I'm still struggling with that fatigue. And I'm working with my doctor, who is a functional medicine doctor, to try to balance myself out. But what can you do about this fatigue of the exhaustion of grief? The number one priority for your energy and fatigue is to give yourself grace. Grieving is hard. It is energetically hard, emotionally hard, mentally hard. So there is going to be physical manifestation of that. So the most important thing in your energy and fatigue is to give yourself grace. I have been working with a functional medicine doctor and doing energy work and processing my grief and separating my trauma and processing my trauma for many years now. And the fatigue is still there. Okay. So again, the priority here is grace for yourself. And yes, you should be worried if you feel like there's some physical manifestations. For me, my hormones were off, my thyroid was off. There was other physical reasons for that fatigue. And I continue to work through trying to stabilize those things, right? So fatigue is your body's general symptom to tell you something's wrong. And if you're experiencing intense grief, something's wrong. So again, give yourself grace. Don't just try to drink coffee all day or fight the fatigue. Rest. Allow yourself to rest in the middle of the day. Do light exercise instead of strenuous exercise, right? This has been one of the things for me. I love yoga, and I honestly love like this hot, intense yoga, and I feel great. But I started trying to do that first thing in the morning, and it was wiping out all of my energy. And so now I'm just doing it once or twice a week in the evening so that I can come home and rest after. So when you think of fatigue, it is your body's first sign to slow down, to give yourself grace. Take the time to grieve. I have lots of videos on how do we actually grieve. Making sure that we are listening to our bodies. Remember, fatigue is that first sign that your body's telling you to slow down. What about appetite? Many people in stressful situations, which grief can be stressful, either have an increase in appetite or a decrease in appetite. I personally have an increase in appetite, and I can tell you why. Grief is heavy. For me, it has caused some depression, and carbohydrates actually increase neurotransmission in your brain. And so this is why we crave, those of us who crave sweets when we're stressed out, that craving, those carbohydrates are actually doing something chemically in your body. But they also have a negative impact, right? They do stimulate some of that production, but then the lows are lower. So if you are the kind of person that has an increased appetite, I want you to prioritize protein and fat and try to minimize carbs, especially bad carbs, sugar, processed foods, those kinds of things. They just negatively contribute to these things that you're trying to fix, right? They negatively contribute to your energy levels and your sleep and your overall health. So if you are an overeater, I want you to prioritize protein and fat. I don't want you to try to go on a diet when you're grieving. And you'll say, well, I'm going to be grieving for the rest of my life. Yes, I do want you to gain control, but I don't want you to go on a diet because, again, back to the fatigue and the grace to yourself, a diet is stress. And, that stress will negatively impact the other stress that's going on. So give yourself some grace. And I want you to try to minimize processed foods and sugars and just focus on protein and fat. That is also true for those of you who lose your appetite. And I want you to prioritize protein and fat. If all you can do is eat, little niblets all day long, I want you to make sure that what you are eating has protein and fat. If you sit down for dinner and you have, steak, mashed potatoes, and a vegetable, I want you to start with your steak. I want you to eat as much steak as you can, even if that means not having any of the mashed potatoes or broccoli, right? Like, I need you to prioritize protein and fat. If you're a vegetarian, I want you to be eating nuts and seeds. They have protein and fat. If all you could eat is nuts and seeds, I want you to again, stay away from those carbs because they are fillers. Carbs are fillers. And I'm not like this, everyone should be on a low carb diet. When your appetite is either too much or too little, I need you to prioritize protein and fat because that's what your brain needs. Your brain actually needs fat to heal. Water and fat is what your brain needs. Your body needs protein. And so instead of trying to think through everything, just focus on protein and fat. So to summarize, taking care of yourself, you're going to prioritize sleep by prioritizing the time that you're using to try to get quality sleep. You are going to give yourself grace that the fatigue may linger for a long time. And you are going to focus on protein and fat if your appetite is impacted by your grief. So now I have a couple questions that came in. I abruptly wake up in the middle of the night, almost in a panic. Maybe sometimes it feels like a nightmare. Sometimes I don't even know why it is, and I can't get back to sleep. This is super important, and this is where medication could be beneficial, but also what you're doing prior to going to bed. Increasing that fat before bed will help your brain not go into that fight or flight. So what's happening is that your body has either a cortisol or trauma response in the middle of the night. So, I have other videos on this, but healing that trauma response is important, right? So you obviously have no control over what happens to your body in the middle of the night, but you could eat something very high in fat. So one of the things that I personally do, because I've struggled with this, and I was on a medication called clonidine, which is not a controlled substance. It is for PTSD and ADHD, and it helps the adrenals not flare up in the middle of the night. I have since been able to wean myself off of that, but I do take MCT oil before bed. So MCT oil is a fat that comes from coconuts, and it has a calming effect. So in these cases, you obviously don't have behavioral control over what's happening in the middle of the night. I want you to work with a doctor to prioritize that sleep. Another thing that can abruptly wake you in the middle of the night is sleep apnea. So you probably need to get a sleep study and see if sleep apnea is waking you up. The next question says, I have gained a lot of weight since my husband has passed away. I feel horrible about myself. This is so true for us. Not only do we have the pain of the grief, but now the choices that we're making are giving us other negative things to feel bad about. I want you to focus on that grace for yourself. Yes, I want you to focus on protein and fat. Depending on how long it's been since your husband passed, I would say, maybe you do need to go on a diet, but not in the first year. So if it's in the first year of a loss, don't do anything to stress your body out. But if it's been longer than a year and you're ready to start taking care of yourself and prioritizing yourself, do all the things that I talked about in this video, but also, it might be time to, look at what you're consuming. But I want you to look at what you're consuming and how you're moving your body from a holistic mental health, physical well-being state of mind, not just I'm going on a diet to lose weight. Losing weight is a negative thing in general, right? It's I'm not good enough at this weight, and so therefore I need to be at this weight, right? So that's not self-love. And I think, especially for women and definitely men as well, we have been trained that this is the most important thing, this number, this weight. And although it does impact our health and we should be looking at it, we should be looking at it from a whole person. And if you haven't processed your grief and learned to hold that pain and cherish and separate it from the trauma and learn to let go of that trauma, then a diet's just another stressor. And always remember to prioritize protein and fat when you are, looking to be the healthiest that you can be mentally and physically. All right. The last question is, I'm doing all these things and I'm still tired. I mentioned that, it's been several years. So the most traumatic death for me was my daughter's death. So I lost a son, Johnny, in 2005, Reggie in 2016. And although Reggie's death was very traumatic, his life was traumatic. And so his death actually removed some of that trauma from me. But my daughter's death, unexpected, in her sleep, was the most traumatic to my mind, body, and soul. And it's been 3 years since her death, and I'm still struggling with fatigue. And I've been working with a functional medicine doctor this whole time. I am processing my mental health. I'm, learning how to process the pain of my grief and hold it closely, as well as releasing trauma. And I still struggle with fatigue. So grace, start this journey. And if you want to start this journey with me, click the link below and we will go on this journey. But it's a journey of self-love and grace to yourself. Keep watching on the physical health and how to continue to take care of yourself as you're grieving.